welcome to Montreal International Film Festival's talk show, Insider Approach. I'm Emma and I'm joined today by Arie Posin. He's a film director and a screenwriter with lots of experience in the film industry. Hello Arie, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
It's nice to have you join us and share your story with us as well. We're going to be talking about, your career, how you got into the film industry, and then your motivations, inspirations, and any top tips that you'd have for being successful as a filmmaker today. First
Right.
things first, I was wondering, so you're a director, did you always envisage yourself becoming a director like as you were growing up as a child? Or is this something that a passion that grew?
No, actually, my parents are from what was then called the Soviet Union. They escaped before I was born, but they were very politically active there and anti the government there at the time. So my dad had studied to be a director and was beginning his career as a director, and he ended up getting arrested and sent to a labor camp, and it's a lot of very dramatic story. My grandfather also had spent like 18 years in a labor camp. When they left, and then I was born, and then growing up in Canada, and then eventually in the United States, they always loved movies. Like we'd watch movies, like Sunday was movie day. Like that was, that's where we were every Sunday at the movies. And that's all we talked about. But the whole time they were always kind of, because it was so hard for my dad, he was always trying to work here, and ultimately wasn't really, he did a few little things, but wasn't really able to do much. So they were always kind of negative on going into the movie business as a career. So it never really even occurred to me that it was something you could do, because I'd grown up with like, of course, like basically, of course, this is not something anyone should ever do. It wasn't until I was in college and my roommate was in the film school, and I just became friends with all of his friends, and I started going to his classes with him just for fun because I'd seen the movies on my own. But then to be like to go to film class and be like, oh, I've seen all these movies, and and I love them, and it just kind of grew. It kind of, I fell in love. That's really what happened.
So maybe even so, like you might have you grew up in a creative household then, if your dad and like you had relatives that had attempted this industry before. It's like in your blood, if you will. So, what did you study at uni, at college, and then how did you change? Did you then change studies to go into a film path?
I had a chemistry teacher in high school who was like the best teacher I had in high school, and he taught chemistry as a like a story. It was like a story of attraction and repulsion between molecules and between atoms. And I was never really great at math, but something about the way he taught chemistry, or the way that I absorbed it, I got really good at it. And so when I went to college, I was a chemistry major. And so like basically the furthest, almost the furthest thing you can be from film. Yeah. And so as I say, but I was going to the chemistry classes the first year, and I was like, I never thought I wanted to be a chemist or anything, or a doctor or anything in that arena. It was just what I was starting to study at college. It was a way to go to college, but that's what I switched from. I was a chemistry major.
And then, how did you then get into the film industry? Because you didn't just start out as a director, you must have done some things beforehand to get yourself into the industry, or how did that happen?
It's a very long story that took place over many years. I can give you the short version. The short version was I graduated from film school, and I went to see this old director in Hollywood, and who I'd met along the way, and I said, "Hey, I've got this piece of paper. It says I'm a director, but like, what do I do now?" It was literally like, felt like someone had pushed me off the edge of a cliff. Like, now what? And he was like, "Listen," he said, "you need to go get out of this town." This was in L.A. He said, "Get out of this town, go see the world." You know, and that was very good advice. So I went. I ended up living in Ireland for a while, and then I went to. I was born in Israel, but I hadn't been back since I was a baby. but I ended up going back to Israel for almost a year and living in Tel Aviv, and I started making commercials and documentaries there, and just getting hired to do like anything, like odd jobs, shooting, auditions. I mean, it was like I was there for a while, um, and um, and then I got back and was, broke and kind of kind of nowhere. Got a job working at a talent agency, uh, where you learn a lot about how the business works, but it doesn't really help you like with on the creative side. But at least, understanding how the business works is important. And then I was writing scripts at night while I was working there. After years of that, I think that now we're talking about probably like 10 years after graduation, so a long time. Then I was like, I don't know why I've gotten into just I'm sitting in my room writing scripts when all I ever wanted to do was be on set and be a director. And so I took a break from writing and I just started, I would write like a little short in a day and then go make it and edit it and just like for no money. And then I started spending a little, I didn't have any money, so I started spending a little bit on credit cards. And then I made one. I don't know how many I'd made at that point, maybe five or something, but a handful. And then I made one that did really well and ended up going to all these film festivals and winning a bunch of awards. And so that was kind of that opened a lot of doors, because then I was able to meet with producers and who were saying, well, this is great. You really have, something unique. What do you want to do? And that was kind of the beginning of like a real, like actually getting paid to do it, you know?
How did you go about financing that one and film casting for it?
So, look, if you ask, 20 directors how they got their first movie made, you're going to get 20 unique stories. And I think that that's the lesson. There is not any like one way to do it. Like each script, it's like a child. It kind of has its own personality and its own way of making it through the world. So, but I'll tell you that the story with Chumscrubber was, I'd met the writer, and we decided to collaborate. He would be the writer, and I'd be the director, and so we kind of built up this idea for a movie. And originally, we were like, we'd both been trying, hitting, banging our heads against the door, trying to get into Hollywood, and not having much success. So we thought, you know what, we're just going to make it, like just on video, like with friends. The last minute before we did that, we were like, you know what, let's just send it out to a handful of producers that we like, that we think would be right for it. And maybe they'll read it. Some of them did, some of them didn't even read it. But one of them, it was read by an assistant, then it was read by an executive. It kind of worked its way up, and that was at Lawrence Bender's company. And Lawrence had produced all of Quentin Tarantino's movies, and he seen what the Chum Scrubber was about. He felt like he'd be the right guy for it, and literally got a call from him one day after it had worked its way up, and he read it. He was like, "I just read your script. I love it. Who the hell are you?" you know and that was really the beginning, you know. So Lawrence was in the middle of making a new Tarantino movie and said, I'm going to need a partner if you're okay with that. There was this producer named Bonnie Curtis who'd been working with Spielberg for like 15 years, who was, looking for like, it's one thing to work with Spielberg, which is kind of the height of the business, but she really wanted to like start with a new director, like a young director, and go through the trenches. And so, and Lawrence had met her, so he brought her in, and I met with her, and I loved her, and I still love both of them to this day. That was the beginning. So once Lawrence and Bonnie said they wanted to make the movie, then Bonnie said to me, "Well, who do you want in it?" Because of her experience in Spielberg land, she knew a lot of people. So I think the first person on, I had said, Rita Wilson. There was a character named Terry in the movie, and I had been picturing Rita Wilson, and Bonnie said, "Oh, I know Rita. I'll just send it to her." And so she sent it to Rita Wilson, and Rita read it and met with me and said, "I love it and I want to do it." And that was kind of the start of it. Like once I had Lawrence and Bonnie and a like established actress saying, I like this, then all of a sudden the business was like, oh, this seems like a movie that's going to get made. And then it became a lot easier.
Yeah, it sounds like you landed on your feet a bit there. So it's like a bit of try, do as much as you can by yourself, and then hand out your work everywhere you can, and see what opportunities you can jump onto.
That's exactly right. The thing that I would add to that is, you know how sometimes, like, I don't know if this is the right metaphor, but like, you turn on you turn on the hot water and it comes out cold for a while, and it takes a while for the hot water to come. I sometimes think, I look back at that time and I think creativity and screenwriting and directing is a little bit like that. Like, you got to get, like, there was a lot of bad scripts that I wrote, and, projects that were not very good. The first few shorts were not good, were bad is really the word for it. And you got to kind of get those out of your system. You got to work through that before the good stuff starts coming. So I think that's a big part of it. I think there's very few people who kind of literally come out of college or whatever and are just naturally gifted. Maybe Spielberg is one of them. He's had his camera while he was in the crib and taking pictures of his mom, from his baby crib or something.
Where do you get, when you're directing these big films, like where do you get your inspiration from? Where does all of your ideas come from? And do you think you've got a personal attachment to the films that you create?
For sure, a personal attachment is crucial. You have to have a deep reason. Sometimes you can't even, you may not consciously know what that is, but you have to feel that you're on a mission to tell the story. I think you have to, because there's so many dark nights, and there's so many ups and downs, and there's so many moments where you're banging your head against the wall, or the ideas just aren't good enough, or there are challenges with financing or with actors or with there's so many different challenges along the way, that if you don't have a personal reason for doing it, you won't stick it out. But that, I'd say that generally, but like specifically, Chumscrubber very much came about because of conversations that the writer and I were having about growing up in suburbia, and about our sense of the divide between parents and teenagers. The Face of Love was a movie that where literally, something had happened to my mom very similar to the premise of that movie, at least the beginning of it. And then I kept having dreams of what happened after, and so that was extremely personal, because I literally couldn't get it out of my head. And the In Between, which is the most recent thing that I did, is very much about like that feeling of like, when you lose someone, but you feel like they're still around and it's not over. Is really kind of exploring that, like, really real feeling that I've had in my life.
You can see like a part of you coming through in the work that you've created, and that's something to bear in mind. So like you get inspiration from personal experiences. Do you get inspiration also from other films and other directors that are in the industry as well?
I'm constantly watching movies. There's a list of movies I watch probably every year, that, like, my top 10 or so, that and then there's like another 10 that maybe I watch every other year. So I kind of, when you see the same movie over the course of your life, the movie obviously doesn't change, but you change. And so you start seeing different things in it, and so in a way the experience changes. And then I have a daughter now, and so watching movies watching her watch movies for the first time that I love is like re-experiencing them for the first time. So yeah, it's all of that is a big part of the inspiration, for sure.
Okay, and like that's interesting. So like with that in mind, like you've got this 10 films that you watch every year, and like other people, like more often than not nowadays, with the ease of access to different films and TV shows, tend to watch. films multiple times. Does this come into your mind when you're directing films, like to include maybe different layers within a scene so that it could, what you just said, like it's like you watched the film for the first time?
What I love in the movies that I watch is when you discover something or notice something that you never noticed before, no matter how many times you watched it. And it's such a thrill, it's like it would be like, you love somebody and you spend years with them, and then you find out they studied sculpture for 5 years. I never knew that. It's like to discover something about another person that you think you know really well. Yeah, that's amazing. So I always try and put into all of my movies things to reward those who want to see it more than once. Yeah, there are many, many, many things in all the movies that I hope reward repeat viewing.
And I say some of these films, well, films in general, they take a long time to film, essentially. So, how do you keep motivated, and how do you motivate your crew to keep the morale high within your crew throughout the whole filming process?
I think that's why, if you want to be a director, it's so important to just start making things, to start shooting. We've all got a movie studio in our pockets now on our phones. One of the things that you discover about yourself, which I think is really crucial, is if you enjoy it. That's the only way you're going to make it. In other words, you can't just be result oriented, like, oh, I'm going to work really hard and then I'm going to be fill in the blank, rich or famous or what, have an Oscar or whatever the thing at the end of the rainbow is. It's got to be the journey that is the bliss. And so when I'm working, I don't need any more motivation other than I feel so lucky and privileged to be able to make movies that I wake up early and I go to sleep very late when I'm working on a movie. I always want to be the person with the most energy on the set. Sometimes I'm not, because sometimes I work with amazing people who are also coming every day with the same kind of like creative excitement that I am, uh, and have the same bliss. But that's what I'm always, that's what I think you want to discover if you're making short films is like, God, I love the process, not just the reward, but the process along the way. In terms of keeping the crew motivated, I think the best thing you can do is sort of the authenticity of just being like, my excitement is real. Like, I really want to tell this story, and I think that gets communicated to everybody in words and also in without words. It's like an attitude. It's like, defeat is not an option. Like, we are going to take the hill. Like, it's the way Napoleon would go into battle. Like, there's losing is not an option. Like, we will win. And I think to everyone wants to take the hill, and that sometimes movie making feels like a battle, but it's not with a person or with an army. It's with the clock. You're really battling the clock. You're battling the time passing every day, every hour, and trying to get the whole thing in the can, before they tell you you have to stop.
For sure. And like with the in between, then this film was released 2022, right? So that's like following the peak of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. Did this then affect the filming process and how you go about directing now?
Oh, for sure, it affected. I mean, when I first went, we shot it in Atlanta. When I first went there, it was January, I think, of 21. But anyway, it was scary. It was like when I left LA, it was definitely like the mask and the stuff on the hands, and like I hadn't left my house in a long time, and it was definitely scary. And then on the set, I would say it was really, we dealt with it, but it was not I was not happy about that particular visitor to the set. we ended up getting through it and no one got sick, and that's so all the safety precautions worked. But on the other hand, there's so much about filmmaking which is camaraderie, you know, like we're all in the circus. We're like a traveling circus, and we everyone comes in and puts up the tent, and we put on a show, and there's something that feels so social about that, and we all kind of become a family for each other. And that happened on In Between, but less so than on the other projects I've been involved with. We weren't allowed to have more than a certain number of people in a certain size space, and all that stuff we all dealt with. So I'm happy we're on the other side of it. I'm excited to see when people start making movies about that time, because it really, to me, it, especially now looking back, it feels like we lived through a movie. You know, it feels so unreal what we all went through, and we're all still living with the effects of that. So I think there's a lot to say and a lot to explore about that time. But I'm happy I'm happy we're here.
And with the pandemic, there was a huge rise in like streaming sites and the amount of films online now, and a lot of films now are skipping out the movie theaters altogether and going straight to these streaming sites. So now, does that change your perspective on directing? If you're not necessarily directing something that's going to be in a movie theater with like that experience with the sound and the special effects, which can really come alive in a movie theater, if you're just going to be putting something onto Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever.
Yeah, it is. Look, I'm really happy in terms of my own work. I just want people to see it. So as long as it's in a place where if you want to see it, you can access it. Like I'm super happy. You know, when In Between came out, especially when it came out, it was on Paramount Plus in the U.S. and then it was on Netflix everywhere else. You know, it was amazing. It was like, you know, it was a number one movie in the world for weeks. So I, I have no complaints about that. Like if people can, you know, who want to see the movie can see it, I'm really happy about that. Um, as a movie goer, I think we're really missing something. When you watch a movie by yourself or with just a couple of people versus watching it in a movie theater, you know, someone once said that a movie audience collectively is always a genius, no matter who it's comprised of. You know, collectively, they're always brilliant. And it's true. It's been so many times where I've been in a movie theater and something happens on screen. Maybe you don't laugh, but the person two rows down laughs, or maybe 20 people laugh, and you go, oh, okay, that was like, it makes you realize that was funny, or that was, or something is scarier when people around you scream, right? Um, so that collective thing, I think we're really missing something by not seeing movies in the movie theater. So as a moviegoer, I try and see as much as I can in the movie theaters, and I think I'm hoping that we'll go back to it because uh, there's no replacement. You know, books are something you read by yourself. Movies are a collective experience.
Going back to your directing experiences, how would you describe like your way of directing, your directing technique? Are you more, you go into the set and you've got this clear idea of what you want it to look like, or do you take a lot of lead from your actors or crew and it goes like in a more bottom up approach? Like, how does it work for you?
I like how you put that question because I think the answer is that I reject the idea that it's either one or the other. What I would say is I'm a huge believer that everything on the screen matters. Everything. The color of the walls, the shape of the table, the sound, obviously, what sounds are in, what sounds are not in, or you know, excluded. Obviously, the faces, the performances of the characters, but everything matters. The clothes they're wearing, of course, where the camera goes, where you cut, how often you cut, the rhythm of the cut of a particular scene or sequence. All of that, I think, is crucially important. And so I try and have made decisions on all of that before I show up at the set. If I showed up on the set, I have a plan that I could execute step by step. But I'm always hoping for input from everyone, crew and cast, and also surprises. All the best moments in movies are things that happen that you were not planning for. That's always the exciting thing, because that's where you feel like it's really reality in front of you, because you didn't it because it's surprising, like if you can live in that place where the ground is unrolling under your feet, that's an exciting place to be. So that's always the wish. And I try and create an atmosphere on set where people feel free to try things and come up with ideas and play. Let's play. But I also have made decisions and choices that I can always fall back on, or at least lean into, in or so that I don't feel adrift, you know, and so that the cast and the crew don't feel that I'm adrift, which is an important part of it too, you know. But it's like, like I say, there's the mountain, and we're gonna get to the top of the mountain. But should we go this way or should we go that way? Should we go around or should we just plow straight up? That's all the fun of like showing up on the set at 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning and going, let's go. How are we getting there?
Yeah, that's really good. That's a good insight into what it's like to be a director, having all the different elements and different people around you on set, but yet having a plan of action, if you will, to go off of still. I was wondering, what is it like to have one of your films just released? How does that feel? Your film's released. What's the feeling like?
I mean, for sure, it's excitement because you've been carrying this baby. I mean, I haven't had I have a daughter, but I didn't carry her for 9 months. But I can imagine that maybe it's a little bit like that, where it's been this thing that we've all been working on for so long, to then put it out in the world is such an exciting, fulfilling moment. But it can also be painful, because up until the time it goes out into the world, you still have a chance to change things and fix them and make things better, make that one little sound effect a tiny bit quieter, and make that wall a little bit greener, and add a tiny bit more rain on that windshield, or whatever the details are. And then once it's out there, you can't do anything anymore. So that colors it too. It's a little sad. That's why the best thing to do is jump into another one, as soon as possible, because it's otherwise it can be painful.
Do you actually like to watch your own films then? It sounds like you're a bit of a perfectionist. I mean, the grass is always greener. I could do this, I could do this. But do you like to watch your work?
Absolutely not. No, because all I see are all the things that I would do different. I can't remember where I read this, but it's so good. Some great director said this, that you have to think of your movies not as like, this thing you're trying to perfect, but as a snapshot of who you were at the time when you made it. Because yeah, as you grow and you learn and um, expand whatever ideas that you're working from, or you find inspiration, there's always like, oh God, I wish I could change that. Billy Wilder used to say there was a corner in LA, the corner of Santa Monica Boulevard and Beverly Drive. And he said, I hate this corner more than any other place in the city of LA. And the reason was it was about halfway from Paramount Studios to where his house was, where he was living. And inevitably, at the end of every day of shooting, it was right around Santa Monica and Beverly, where he would punch his fist into the steering wheel and say, oh, now I know how I should have shot that scene we shot today.
Okay, the next generation of filmmakers out there, what skills do you think they need to become great directors? So,
Look, I think I would start with emotion. Like, you have to love movies, and then beyond that, you should, as soon as possible, you should start making them. And I mean like a minute long little movie, or cut together like a, a school event, or anything that you can film. Your friends in a band and you shoot their concert, or anything. The sooner you can start doing that, the sooner a few things are going to happen. First of all, that love that you have for movies is going to get hopefully translated into a love for doing it, right? So in other words, you're going to figure out pretty quickly if you enjoy it, because it's a lot of work, and along the way it's a lot of stumbles. It's a roller coaster, right? And there's a lot of downs, and it's not for everybody, you know. And the sooner, if it's not for you, the sooner you can figure that out, the better, right? Because your life will be better. If you're not meant to be a director, it's better not to go down that path. But if you really then love doing it, the other thing that's going to happen is the people around you are going to start telling you if you're any good or not. First of all, they'll be able to tell you with their reactions, even without words. Like if you make something that's meant to be funny and people laugh, then it was funny, you know? And if you make something supposed to be scary and people are frightened, then it worked. And if they're not, you get to learn from that and kind of go, well, why didn't that work? Why didn't they jump in their seats? I thought they would jump there. That's what I was trying to do. So that's how you grow as a filmmaker. And then of course, then there's the bigger world, which is you start entering film festivals, or places where people who don't know you and aren't rooting for you personally are watching your work. And so if they start loving it, then it's kind of a road that you find your way down. It's kind of like making a movie. I always think, like, for me, the making of a movie feels like you're in the dark with a flashlight and you're just trying to figure out like where the walls are and not stick your hand into a mouse trap. But you don't quite know the shape of the space you're in, and you're kind of discovering it. So that's what I would say to anyone who wants to make film. If you can do it on your own, great. If you feel like you need the structure of a film school, then do that. But anything that gets you shooting so that you can figure out if you love it and if others love what you're doing, that's where I would start. And I think it's a really exciting time, because it's never been, the technical side of directing has never been more kind of democratized and available to everybody. And the other thing that I would say is search for yourself. you know like, ultimately we each have a unique life story and a unique perspective. And so I think the part of making shorts and shooting things and then looking back at what you have and improving it, tightening it, changing it, reacting for or against it, kind of helps you discover who you are as a storyteller. Some people make comedy films. Some people make horror films. Some people do everything, but in their own way. So I think that's also an important part of the journey. And I'd say that's the other thing that you're looking for as you're doing it. Am I loving it? Are other people loving it? And do I feel like it's authentic to me, like no one else would have made it quite like I did?
That's all really good advice, honestly. Great words of wisdom from you, Ari, today. Thank you so much for sharing this story, your journey into directing. I was wondering, where can people follow your journey if they want to find you on social media? Do you have Instagram or Twitter?
I'm on Instagram, just my name, Arie Posin, and then I have a website, arieposin.com. Those are probably the two best places.
Awesome. And finally, what do you love most about filmmaking?
Oh God, that's such a hard question. Finally, and then you ask me the hardest question of the day. That's like saying, I know you love your wife. What's the thing you love most about her? I was gonna say I love it even when I don't, if that makes sense. Even when it's hard, and even when it hurts, and even when it you know disappoints, I still love it.